each week here on Co-Creation Station, we talk about a different topic. And today we have our first guest ever.
Our first guest ever! Thank you,
We are
Alice.
very excited to have Alice Olsher, who is a teacher of the Alexander technique in San Diego, with us today. And Alice, welcome to Co-Creation Station. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So exciting.
We are super psyched to have you here. So we were talking before we went on the record button about how I know a little bit about the Alexander technique, and Stephanie knows, I guess, a little less.
A little less. So we're all going to learn today.
We all have
I'm
a lot
excited.
to learn today.
Yeah.
So I think what I would like to start is just asking you how you found out about it, how you got into it, and why it struck a chord with you early on. And then we can sort of ask you more questions about what you're doing today and that sort of thing.
Okay, so that's easy. The story that I love to tell is that I grew up in California. I was born in the Midwest of the States, grew up in California, and then I was studying singing and acting, which I love to do in Hollywood. And then I moved to London to study theater. And at that time, it was the first time I met my very first Alexander technique teacher. So the story I love to tell is how I was not so confident when I was growing up and was always looking for something. And I was also always very helpful. So when this lovely woman walked in to the drama school, and she was actually auditioning for the job of Alexander technique teacher in the drama school. And she asked for a volunteer, so I raised my hand. And I went up and she put her hands on me, and everything changed in my whole system.
Wow.
And I was a perfect person to choose because I was pretty squashed down and, in my use of my body, but her very, very gentle, almost feather-light hands had a energy in them, which we call direction in the Alexander world. And suddenly I transformed visually, and she got the job. Wonderful. Became our Alexander technique teacher. And I remember, I love also to tell this story when I'm working with young actors, that people said, oh, that's great, and it will help with your voice, and it will help, you to speak more clearly. And I thought, this is going to save my life. That's what I thought. I knew it at the time because it was an inspiration of how my system could come together.
That knowingness, we talk about that in several of our episodes, like you knew. It's just knowing.
Yeah. So that's how I came to it. And then I carried on having lessons. We had like 10 lessons given to us as part of the theater training, but I never stopped having lessons after that. I then moved on to work with this lovely woman whose name is Mary Holland. And she was teaching at a place called the Constructive Teaching Center, where she'd done her training. And that's where I met the people who ended up being my trainers, Jellis and Walter Carrington. And I carried on having lessons there for many, many years. I had lessons for 15 years before I went into the teacher training.
Wow.
Because I was really, really determined to do my acting. So I understand now that Walter said, yep, she'll be back. And do her acting and she'll be back. Because he knew. He totally knew. So I met them when I was 20 years old, something like that.
Wow.
And I did my acting, which was super fun. And then I got to the point where I decided it was time for me to train. And so I trained. I trained with them, and then I was very lucky, or maybe it's just providential how it turned out, that they asked me to stay and teach and be a member of the staff. And I taught with them for 15 years, and I learned how to be a teacher trainer. So then when we came back to California in 2005 for family reasons, Dilys Carrington said to me, if you don't come home, you start a training course. I've trained you to be a trainer. So
Wow.
that's how I started doing teacher training in San Diego.
Ah.
And then last year, when it's a hands-on work that I do, I put my hands on people and it changes their system. It brings them back into balance and coordination, which both calms the system as well as wakening it up. Alexander called it quickening the mind, like the quick and the dead. And so it does, because it brings you into coordination in the system, which allows the mind to think more clearly, more focused.
So are you moving energy? What is actually happening?
So I'm working with my own use, which is what you start to learn when you have lessons. You come in and someone puts hands on you and they've already done all this work on themselves. And then I'm meeting the other person where they are with their energy. Basically, all of us had beautiful natural use when we were born. And it gets interfered with for very many reasons at very different stages of our lives. But if you watch a baby who lives in a particularly normal, I suppose normal-ish household, and you watch their development, you can see how they learn how to turn over, roll, and their coordination is just there. And then
Innate, natural, yes.
it's naturally there. Mm-hmm. And then it gets interfered with for many reasons, by watching their parents who have had their use interfered with. So the way they use themselves, they could be squashed down or whatever. They watch that. And if everything goes along pretty normally, they go on pretty well through their development until they get to school. And that's where it starts really getting.
Yeah, I laugh because school is, children change when they go to school.
Well, right.
That happen.
I mean, the education system has it's trying so hard to do something, but I have many views about that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
It's a whole
other episode.
Although it's very connected, it's another topic, but it's also connected.
Correct.
Because the thing with the education system is that they're stuffing information in rather than drawing forth. Yeah. And they're putting people on chairs that don't fit for them. And they're telling them to try very hard. And the trying very hard starts getting them to tighten, shorten, and pull down into themselves. And then they're teaching them to write. And their legs start wrapping around the chair, and they can't. And they're squished all down, and then they can't breathe very well. And then they're looking up, and because they haven't behaved exactly perfectly, they've had their little smiley face taken off the board, and then they squash down more into themselves, and they're not breathing. They're told to hurry up, way past what their system can do. And I love to tell that it's kind of like if you imagine a tiny 2-year-old and how little their legs are, and they start walking with a very tall dad, could be a mom, but very tall person, and they're just walking at their own pace. But the little child can't catch up. So they're always just tripping just a little bit in order to catch up. And what the Alexander technique does is it lets them come back to themselves. So they get connection through to the ground and above their head, and all connected all the way through. And that's what it has to offer with hands-on, because that energy is transferred, because when you go and have lessons, you start to learn how to stop, you start to learn how to allow that to happen. And then when you go to train, you learn more. The teacher training is just more of the same, learning how to stop, which allows that direction to come through, so that then when the teacher's working with a student, they put their hands on and they meet the person where they are. And they're not pulling them or shoving them, particularly the way that I trained in the Carrington method. There's no putting them into a place. It's really together we find this natural use that everybody has, which is what Alexander found out when he just started working with the fact that he couldn't speak without losing his voice. And he went on this whole adventure because of that.
It sounds so loving and nurturing, and just it sounds absolutely beautiful, like very respectful and nurturing. Love, yeah, it's wow.
And respectful is a really good way to describe how it's taught too, because teaching Alexander, you're teaching like from here, not from up here. You're not bossing people around because you're meeting them where they are. And the interesting thing is that I didn't know if I could do this online. I really didn't.
Yeah.
And Colin can tell you that it does work online, but I didn't know. I had to figure out. So what I've understood is that I can stay with myself, and it comes through my voice and my words, and I can still stay with the person where they are.
Yeah.
And yes, it's very respectful. It's a really respectful, mutual respect. It's taught through mutual respect.
And a lot of accepting, like really accepting someone where they're at. Yeah, I love that, meeting them where they are.
The thing that was, I mean, there was a lot of things that were interesting about my lesson with you, Alice, but a lot of times, because we talk about that a lot, about how in different ways we come into this world kind of natural and kind of perfect, and then whatever, like society and education and traumatic experiences kind of mess with that. So when I hear like a health, any sort of health practitioner say, oh, we're going to restore you to your natural whatever, it's great, but I also start to cringe if I have to do it, because it's going to be like, well, now I'm comfortable in this like screwed up way that I've learned, and it's going to be uncomfortable to go back to what's natural. And that is not the experience I had working with you at all, because and just to let Stephanie know, so I'm a musician, and what I really talked to Alice about and why she offered to work with me was because I've had a major issue like practicing guitar throughout my life. I just don't enjoy it. I love writing songs,
Really?
I love playing songs,
I
but
didn't know that about you.
I can't stand practicing technique. And part of that is because what Alice helped me see is that and I think there's like a mental component to this that I learned, and then it translated into a physical component of like my insecurity about being good at playing guitar or being afraid of practicing or whatever has translated into this death grip on the neck of the guitar. I've seen other guitarists do it. It's not like I'm the only one that does it.
Yeah.
But I had this like literally, I had so much tension in my fingers.
Wow.
And Alice showed me, and we did this remotely because this was during COVID. I was in LA and she was on a screen, in San Diego, just like now. And she actually showed me, that I could just change the position of my hand. And I had all this power in the fact that my hand was where it sort of should be, like it was where it naturally fit to be, where it was, and on the neck of the guitar and the fingers on the strings and everything. And it was insane, because all of a sudden, like I had for years, literally decades, I've been trying to hold down strings like with all this tension in my fingers and everything. And after working with Alice for like 5 minutes, I literally was like, my hand was completely relaxed, and it would just go to the strings in the right place. And I had more power in the fingers than I've ever had. Even though before I was like, I thought I was putting like all this power in, but what she sort of showed me was that by crunching up and, doing this, you actually lose a lot of the natural energy and power, which I never knew. I always thought if you want more power, you have to crunch more.
And that is exactly what we talk about here, Alice, is that there's so much power in flow. That's what I just heard Colin describe, is you taught him how to physically be in the flow. And then Colin, you described like you gained your power. And that's like, the power in joy, my business name is because, we're all told like we have to try so hard, and you were describing the schooling and, and it's like, that's just all resistance, and we stop the flow. But yet when we get into the flow, we gain this power, and the universe comes in, and God comes in, and spirit comes in, and magic happens. And that is our true power. And oh, I love that. 5 minutes. And something that's been plaguing you for so long. And oh my goodness. So what's it been like, Colin, since?
I mean, it's just night and day. It's just absolute night and day. Like I just don't have to work the way that I used to. You know, I didn't even realize it, because in my head when I'm playing, I mean, I'm trying to quite often like remember chord positions and remember lyrics and sing the right notes and all that sort of stuff. So like I wasn't aware really until I worked with Alice that, I mean, she looked at it and she's like, you see how your hand is all crossed out? And I was like, oh yeah. Oh
But
yeah, it is.
that's normal. I do that. That's how it's supposed to be.
And so that connection. So basically, the Alexander technique talks about this connection of the neck, head, back, and how that is natural. If I just show you that on the skeleton, since he's right there.
Mr. Bones.
The guy.
I've named him for you, Alice.
Just show how the muscles spiral.
Oh, can you speak up some, Alice? Because it's hard to hear you.
I said these ribbons show how the muscles spiral around.
Oh, okay.
But so when I was working with Colin, I was talking about, hang on, let's bring him a little nearer. Can't quite see his head. That what happened when he was tightening in his wrist and hand was that he was disconnecting the whole arm, and that connection all the way up through here, through his head. So what Alexander found was that this spine is naturally long. It's not straight. It has to have curves in it. People think it needs to be straight, and then they try and pull it straight. And so all those techniques that teach you how to pull yourself into this place or sit up straight or do all these different things, they don't do what Alexander does, because Alexander lets you undo the tightening that gets in the way of the natural length.
Ooh.
So you're undoing the tightening. It's like the tightening or the resistance, Stephanie.
Yes.
The resistance is tightening.
Resistance, yeah, exactly.
And it's tightening in the brain. And it's tightening in here when you feel emotionally.
Yeah.
You're tightening here. You can
everywhere.
So I'm teaching people when they're tightening, but we're looking for them to allow this length. And the length comes all the way through to the feet, which is connection. So what Colin was doing was tightening through here and all the way up through here into the throat, where he was trying to sing, and into the head. So I got him to lie on the floor so that that could help him undo, because that's something you can do. And like one of my students, who's actually now a lovely teacher for 10 years, said, and it's free. You lie on the floor, you put books under your head, under the skull, and you put your knees up, and it allows the spine just to come to length. Oh. And you just allow the hands to just rest either on your tummy or like this, and you don't have to do anything. It's just,
so your knees are like this?
Your knees are bent and your feet are on the ground.
On the ground, okay. And then are you using one or two books? Like what would be the height?
Well, I sort of work with people to decide the height with them, but if I were to say, I would say if you put your hand like this, then probably the width of the four fingers.
Okay.
And it goes under this bit of your head, not under the neck.
So this flat part, the flatter part?
The skull, under the bone.
Okay, yeah.
If you put your hand on your neck and you follow it up, you'll see where the skull is.
Yeah.
So it's that joint that people tighten. That's where they start to tighten.
Yeah, because I carry a lot of my tension in my neck and my back, my shoulders.
So this lying down might be wonderful for you.
And I've heard other people like yoga, or I think my chiropractor, my homeopath, other people have told me about lying down and even putting my butt up against the wall and having my legs. But I've also heard similar to what you're saying. So I'm going to try that. That's fabulous.
Yeah. So the thing about doing that, and then we're allowing that thought of the length, which then Colin was thinking about. And so I got him to think of letting go to length. And then to think of the fingers, because was it the fingers on the frets?
Yeah.
Okay, so when he was making the chords, So when he was putting the fingers on the frets of making the chords, instead of thinking he had to have the power by pushing, if he thought of the length and the connection through to the head, back and feet, then he was more in the upright and he was getting more power in the sense that it was getting what I call direction, or we can call energy, because he wasn't tightening against it. So this trying just disconnects that energy. It's like, here I am, and I'm just thinking of my head. If this is my head, and I'm just pulling it back here, which is tightening in that joint that I just showed you. Now, if I just stop tightening there, it just does that. And it goes forward and away and allows this whole thing to lengthen.
Flow. Yeah.
And that's what you got in that lesson. First, when we did the lie down, because the lying down just takes away the need to try and figure it out.
Yeah.
And then you can give yourself, in this flow way that you're talking about, you can just give yourself time. And the other thing is, this work gives you time. It gives you time and it gives you space. So, and I mean, don't you think that's what you experienced?
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit more though? Like, how does it give us time? Because we're spending time trying to figure out how to force things, or?
Because you're taking time to stop.
Yeah.
Because this work is all about learning how to stop.
Naps are great.
and really, but it's how we stop in a certain direction. Because we could stop like this, and we could stop like that for a really long time, but that's not going to help.
It's not rejuvenating either.
What did you say, Stephanie?
It's not rejuvenating either.
No, it's just more of the same, right?
And the energy is like expending, how much energy we expend with that.
Yeah, in startle pattern, you know how when we get, like, somebody slams the door and you get traumatized like that, and you can stay like that. And I think what happens when people experience trauma is that they actually are a little bit like that all the time.
Yeah,
so what Alexandra does is you just kind of put hands on, and you don't chat about it, but you just stay with my own direction. And then suddenly, like a flower, you undo that tightening.
It's like you're giving people permission to relax and just really be themselves. Like you're bringing them back to who they really are. And because of your technique and your training, and I think it takes a special kind of person to do the work that you do, like someone who's very sensitive. It's like, it's almost like that, how we wanted to be cradled by our mothers, you know, just like gently, like, it's okay, you know, kind of. That's what I'm feeling like when you say that. And it's just like, like all is well in the world.
Yeah. And if we can be cradled, not like that, but with space.
Just,
grow.
Right.
So that's kind of, and what I meant by time is it takes time to let go. It takes stopping to let go.
It's a practice. It's like meditation. So it's a very meditative state to just be.
It is. And it's interesting because I love meditation, and I think that sometimes it can be very misinterpreted.
Absolutely.
You know, people say, oh, well, I'm going to be vacant. And
or and not think a thought. It's like, no, that's what our mind does. It's going to, but we just want to slow down, just slow down.
Yeah. So
still thinking, but just slow.
Allow the thoughts, right? Like allow the breath. So when people talk about taking a breath, I say allow the breath, because the breath is there. We're just getting in the way of the breath.
Yeah, like holding. I was thinking about this recently because I hadn't gotten a massage in, I think, a month. And so I had all these knots, and I'm, walking through some transition in my life. It's very challenging. And so it's a lot more stress than usual. And I was like, am I holding my breath? Like what's happening? And so I love what you're saying about all of this.
It also strikes me, I mean, this is slightly off topic, but I feel like it's really not. It really goes right along with it, is that so much of it's interesting because we were also talking before we started recording about productivity gurus, of which I am, trying to recover from an addiction to various people on the internet who are, but it's interesting because a lot of the trend for a long time was like, do more, work harder. And now a lot of the people I'm following, they're talking about like we've done that too much, in the sense that like now it's almost like in people's daily lives, if they just feel like they can go out and accomplish like 15 things a day, that it'll, that's the way to get what you want in life and to be happy and everything. But what we're finding out is that just doing things for the sake of doing things is not getting us where we want to be.
It's not productive.
And the people I'm following now are more about how do you do less, but do it with more focus, with more intention, with more conscious awareness of what you're doing, so that you're actually doing fewer things, but you're choosing the things that count and doing the things that will really move your life forward. So instead of, because there's still this idea out in the culture that, and you say it all the time, like hard work is like, you almost can't argue with anyone. Like, well, you just got to work hard. But the insanity of that is we all know people who work really hard and are broke. So hard work can't be the only indicator to feeling good, success, happiness, all that sort of stuff. It really has to be, and I think people get confused between passion and hard work. Like if you're passionate about something, you want to put energy into it, but you don't have to like sacrifice your whole mind, body, spirit system over it. But like our cultural idea of hard work is like the more hours a day you can work, the more things you can put on your to-do list, the harder you can go. And I just feel like that sort of philosophy must reinforce those of us that are physically like, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to work more hours, you can just feel it. Like when I talk like that, I want to like scrunch up, and I think this, what you're teaching is actually just another way of understanding how we were kind of really naturally meant to be, so that we can sort of be more in flow and make more conscious decisions and things like that. And we don't have to like work really hard. It's more that we need to be, centered and focused and
present. That's
and
what
allowing
came
our
to
natural
me.
systems, what the mind can naturally do, what the body can naturally do, what spirit can naturally do, to help us just let that flow, instead of trying to do everything ourselves, and B, just rack up a lot of hard work in order to be happy or successful or whatever you're trying to go for.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. And then what Stephanie said about being present
And connected. And
through
that's where our joy,
yes.
Yeah, that's what we really want, is to be present and connected. And from that, well-being surfaces, and health and happiness, and it's from the
One thing I
inside
want to
out.
ask you in that vein, Alice, is, I had a lesson before I met you, when I was getting my master's degree in acting. And that's how I had mentally associated it. It's like, oh, this is something that actors discovered, actors use it, and it's only for actors. But we talked about how helpful it was for me as a musician. I mean, it feels like to me, this is something like literally everyone on the planet could benefit from. Is that your understanding? Or?
And actually Alexander's dream was to start with school-age children, to start them before they start using themselves well. And that's been one of the things that I've spent a lot of energy in. I spent 10 weeks working in a kindergarten years ago, and my daughter, and I wrote up a paper about that. So basically, to work with children while they're using themselves well, and to actually be in, would be such a dream. There was a
reinforce that.
Yeah, he did have a little school in Surrey, which was near to where, I think Kent or Surrey, near London. And then we had another one actually in Constructive Teaching Centre, but that was before I was teaching there. And there have been several. There now is a little school in Kingston, which is near London, which is called Educare Small School. And Alexander Technique is part of the curriculum.
Oh, wow.
And it's incredible. And I can send you the link to the videos, because they've done this wonderful, we were doing this big conference and then everything was thrown online. So they've just made it available. So it's available to anyone to look at it. And the last set of videos, I've done a video on encouragement. And it's kind of a mixture of the creative dramatics work I did when I was young, and the Alexander work, and this positive discipline parenting. stuff that I did. So it's kind of a mixture there. But the wonderful thing about that kind of set of videos is that they've got interviews with the children, and they're teaching the children how to be quietly with themselves. And actually, they're teaching the children how to put hands on each other. And it's amazing. It's an amazing school. I mean,
such a supportive environment.
So these kids are learning how to stop, learning how to give themselves time. And what occurred to me, Colin, when you were talking and then connecting up what Stephanie said as well, being present through the whole neuromusculature. So we're not talking about body work. We're not talking about mind work. We're not talking about spiritual work. We're talking about how it all is connected. And that's what I got out of what you said, Stephanie. And then when you were talking about the trying harder, it's like what happens is we leave ourselves behind. So when we're doing or following all these gurus or whatever it is, it's like that little child trying to catch up with that very tall person and not really being able to come up with what's needed because they're not connected with themselves. So doing less and being able to be connected first. And yes, you have to, before you make the choice, right?
Connected
so when
first.
you're making a choice about the next thing, if we make it from this panicked place or somebody else's idea, I mean, of course, we've got Alexander's idea, but Alexander's ideas are how do we come back to ourselves?
Our own,
Yes. And it's, I work with people where they are to work through their issues, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's singing, whether it's acting, whether it's sitting at a computer. And in pregnancy, all the way through pregnancy to childbirth, I work with people, which is so super because then, like one of my teachers that I trained, I worked with her through both of her pregnancies and all the way through the labor of her second child. So those children came out with their own natural use and tons of Alexander direction. So when they get very rowdy and they're here, and now she can too because she's a teacher, I would just put a hand on and say, hey, and they stop and come back to themselves. And she uses this language like, what does your body need right now? What do you need right now? And the older one would say, I need to stop. I need to rest. Then once the stopping, the connection, I need to rest. I'm hungry, Mom. I need a drink of water. So teaching, it's a great skill to teach children that they can use throughout their lives. And it's wonderful to teach people, and nobody's perfect at this, and I'm certainly not perfect at this, even after all these years.
We like perfectly imperfect here.
And well, thank you. And I do that. But it helps with reactivity. So that if you're feeling like you're going to have a strong reaction again, at somebody, we have a tool to, I could wait, I could stop. And you could ask my daughter, like, why are you standing at my door? Why don't you move? And because I can't go until I've stopped first. I have to stop and then not react in a negative way. And, I always say it depends on the stimulus, and the component of self-care, we need to do a lot of self-care, but this is a great tool for self-care, and it fits.
It's fabulous. I was just thinking, like, when he was like, what do you need? And I thought, oh my goodness, when you said that, I was like, do you know how many addictions would never flare up?
Thinking that same thing, yeah.
If we are like in tune with what we need. Like for me, sometimes I've been taking a nap. I think I've taken a nap twice in the last 2 days, which it's really challenging for me to stop and allow myself to do that. And I thought, God, when I can ask myself, what is it that I need? Because I actually went to the fridge and was like, it's not even mealtime. What am I doing? This was like an old behavior I haven't done since I was like 20 years ago or more. And I was like, yeah, just shut the fridge. It's like, I need to go lie down. I need to go lie down. So, but that, I love that.
I think there's, I think that is like a almost universal issue. Like in my, because I, like a lot of people, suffered trauma when I was young. And welcome to the human race in 2021. But
we're all just doing the best we can, y'all parents.
The thing that I've been aware of for a very long time, but it's been very challenging to sort of work on, is what trauma does to me primarily is it trains someone to be uncomfortable being present, because the experience of trauma is that the present moment is dangerous. And so the best thing you can do is somehow get out of the present moment, which is a strange concept considering that's where we always are all the time. Like physically we're always in the present. Whether our mind is there or not, that's another story.
Another story. We're like back when we were 10.
Yeah, but I mean, that's to Stephanie's point. I mean, so much of, and not just like actual full-blown addiction, you know, think about the opioid epidemic in the United States right now. It's been raging for years. Alcoholism and all those sorts of things, but also just like people. I talk to so many people who, and I'm not anti-Netflix. I watch plenty of television and stuff like that, but you know, I do feel like I spend too much time watching content, you know, just whatever. And I talk to a lot of people who, you know, when I ask them how their weekend was, they're like, oh, I watched way too much Netflix, you know, like I really wish I had done something else with that time. And I think people don't understand that. So, you know, especially when we have these electronic things like Facebook, Instagram, and Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, where you're one click away.
Our phones.
And now we carry it all the time with us. And again, I have my iPhone. I love it. I use it for a whole bunch of things. But we have this like instantaneous distraction mechanism that helps us get out of the present moment if we want to. And I think there's such a thing as healthy escape and healthy entertainment. I'm not saying we shouldn't use
with minimal time,
but I think that's, I mean, it's that issue of just not being able to handle the present moment and not really knowing what's going on in your system. Like, because what struck me is when you talked about how Alexander technique can help you understand, you can be present and you can like hear or sense an incoming need or a need that's there in your body. Like, I need rest, I need a glass of water. And then that doesn't have to be a traumatic experience. That's just a normal, natural experience. You're like, oh, I need to go lay down, and you go lay down and rest, you know? Whereas a lot of, you know, like trying to, like if you read a self-help book, and again, I've read many and been helped by many, but you know, it can say, well, you know, you need to rest more. And so you can do the resting more, just like you were saying, Alice, you can do the resting more as like a to-do list. Like I need to rest more. And then like, you know, you wake up and you look at your list for the day and like, oh, I've got to do everything I usually do. Plus I got to rest more. And you're actually using, you know, the thing that really should help you as something to make it all worse, you know? And so I think the thing that's most powerful in what you said is just that the Alexander technique really is a training. It's like you're training yourself to come back to yourself, yes, but also to be able to be in yourself and actually hear your needs and hear your desires and really check in with yourself and be able to process that and make decisions without it being an urgent emergency, you know, which I think is like, it seems like it should be just an obvious thing, but I feel like in our culture right now, that's like a revolutionary concept.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the things that I found, certainly in myself, that I had to work on, and I find with a lot of people, is people have this kind of frozen mind wandering, which I think does come from trauma of various types. And some people have it more than others.
Frozen mind wandering?
Yes. So
what
mind
is
wandering,
that?
like worry.
So it's frozen mind wandering from the past?
But it doesn't really matter. It's just a habit of circular thinking.
Yes. Okay.
That goes on, and I call it frozen mind wandering because it's not conscious.
Oh, okay.
But it seems to, what I'm just thinking when I'm hearing you talk about the trauma and not being able to be in the present, this has just occurred to me to put it in these ways. So this isn't just Alexander technique, but me and my experience of it. So if you think about being in trauma, so you're in startle, but you're frozen there. And then if you've been in an experience where there's been traumatic things going on and you've had to be physically in the present, then we learn how to space out. Like I remember when my mother would be shouting at me when I was younger. And I would think, oh, that's the time I can think about things because she's just going to be shouting for the next whatever time.
Yeah.
But it becomes a habit,
Right.
that not being able to be present. So therefore, not being able to hear what's being said, it makes it really hard to learn.
Yeah.
And one of the other things in one of the other modalities or whatever, the Adlerian, talk about building blocks so that you start out, and Stephanie, you probably know a lot about this, and I'm sure you do, Colin, too. You start out with these building blocks of causal thinking. You learn that it's safe. You learn that the world is safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's your building blocks to be able to start learning information on top. And if you don't have that, it's really hard to be learning on top. So I think Alexander helps you, it's not analytical, so it's not like therapy in that way. And I think therapy is great. So it's not that I'm against therapy, but I'm just saying it isn't therapy. But what it does do is it allows you to be in the present in a very safe place with a lot of safe direction coming through your body and from the person that's working with you, if that makes sense. And so I just wanted to also say, one of my other colleagues just says what Alexander found out and what made him brilliant. He found out that we were perfect, basically, and our bodies are amazing and our system.
Oh my goodness.
The whole system, right?
Yes, right.
And then we interfered with it. And Alexander found out that, and he found out that we interfere and how to stop doing that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And that's really what the Alexander technique is.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And then it gives you all these other opportunities. And in order to do that, you have to stop. And I don't sort of point out to people what they're doing wrong because I don't think that helps them.
Right.
When I'm working with them one-to-one with my hands on in this studio when it's allowed, because what happens is they stop doing it. Yeah. And one of my other colleagues said to me, well, if you don't point it out to them, if it wasn't pointed out to you, how did you change? And I said, well, because when Walter Carrington put his hands on me, all the pulling stopped. And I went up into this direction of the primary control. And that repetitive stopping, I just got, every time I stood in front of the chair, because we work in and out of a chair, because you have to sit down, stand up all day long, Alexander started, oh, we might as well use a chair, something people have to do all day long. And so you start to stand in front of the chair and stop, and the system connects. And then you start to notice what's tightening, and you think, oh, I'm not going to tighten my ankles. I'm going to just let go to the ground and my head's going up. But it's the experience in the system that you get, which then you recreate.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of a lot with the work that I do. When you were saying I don't point out what they're doing wrong, it's like I don't do that with my work. What I do is I guide them to what feels better, and continually doing that week after week, that it creates that muscle, and they just naturally do that. Where if I had done the opposite, it would be this battle. But hearing you say that's exactly what I do, is just to who they really are. Because I think we're spiritual beings having this human experience, and who we truly are is love. Yeah. It's just guiding back to that. And that's what I hear with the Alexander method, is like guiding us back to who we really are.
Yeah.
How our bodies just naturally are amazing.
Alice, I think we could talk to you forever, but we are running out of time, so I want to make sure we provide, if we'll put links and things down in the description of the podcast and the YouTube video, but did you want to say, for people who may be listening in the car or something, did you have website, or how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. So I do have a website, and it's called Alexander Teaching Center, spelled CENTRE, the English way, .com. And that's my website. And on there, you can find my email address, but my email is aliceolsher@gmail.com. And you can contact me that way. And I'm very happy to talk to anybody further. If you're interested in the work, I usually chat with people on the phone and we talk it through and decide whether it's for you or not.
It's beautiful.
Okay.
Oh, Alice, thank you
Thank you
so
so
much. Oh my God. I've learned so much. Like, I've known you for a while, and you've actually, we were at a holiday party and you did some on me, but this has been amazing. Like, you've just opened up my whole world, and I am super excited. And yeah, so congratulations. Thank you for being of service and doing what you love. I think it's the most important thing ever. I'm so happy for you and all the people's lives you've touched, and everyone else that you're going to touch throughout the rest of your work here. Thank you.
No, you too, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And you too, Colin. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And you're our first guest.
Very excited about this episode already. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed listening to or watching this as much as we enjoyed being here this morning. If you feel called to like or subscribe to us, please do so. It does help us a lot, and we're very grateful for your support. If people want to find you, Stephanie, how can they reach you?
www.powerinjoy. It's POWERINJOY.com. I have a free 30-minute discovery session for you.
And you can always reach me at my website, colinworster.com, COLLINWORSTER.com. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we will see you on the next episode of Co-Creation Station.
Bye, y'all.